Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving deep into the POSH Act. That's India's really crucial law for ensuring workplace safety. We're going to break down its core ideas and the powerful committee that's designed to make sure it's enforced. So let's get right into it.
Okay, before we get into any of the details, we have to start with the single most important principle of this entire law. It's a concept that completely changes how we're supposed to look at conduct in the workplace.
To really get a handle on the POSH Act, you have to start at its foundation, and that is this core idea of impact over intent. This is the lens you have to look through for everything else to make sense.
So here's the deal, and this is absolutely crucial. It doesn't matter one bit if someone says, "Oh, I was just joking," or "I didn't mean any harm." This law, which actually grew out of the landmark Vishaka guidelines, completely flips the script. The only thing that matters, the only question to be asked, is whether the behavior was unwelcome and if it had a negative, humiliating, or intimidating effect on the person who experienced it.
So, what kind of behavior are we actually talking about here? What does the law specifically call out as sexual harassment? Well, it's not left up to guesswork. The definitions are both really broad and, you'll see, surprisingly specific. The Act actually lays out 5 really clear categories. It covers the obvious stuff, right? Unwanted physical contact or explicitly demanding sexual favors. But it also gets into the more subtle things, like sexually colored remarks, those lewd jokes or uncomfortable comments about a colleague's body. It even covers showing pornography. And then there's this important catch-all for any other unwelcome conduct, like stalking or persistent leering. Now, all those specific acts, they tend to fall into 2 big legal buckets that you've probably heard of. The first is quid pro quo, which is just Latin for this for that. That's when a job benefit, like a promotion, is tied to a sexual demand. The second is a hostile work environment. This is when the conduct is so bad or so pervasive that it just makes the whole atmosphere at work intimidating or offensive. And a key point here, that can come from anyone, a boss, sure, but also a coworker or even a client.
And this law isn't stuck in the past. It's designed to evolve as our workplaces change. So now it explicitly includes things like virtual harassment through messages or cyberstalking. It recognizes harassment from third parties, like customers. And it addresses what's called intersectional harassment. That's when sexual harassment gets tangled up with other forms of discrimination, like those based on caste or religion.
Okay, so we know what harassment is, but who exactly is supposed to handle these complaints? Well, that brings us to the real engine at the heart of the POSH Act, the Internal Committee, or as you'll hear it called, the IC.
This is so simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Every single organization in India with 10 or more employees is legally required to set up an internal committee. No ifs, ands, or buts. That means this law has a massive reach, covering almost every formal workplace you can think of.
And you can't think of the IC as just some informal HR group. It's what's known as a quasi-judicial body. Now, that's a fancy term, but it just means it has the powers of a civil court. It has real teeth. It can summon witnesses, demand to see documents, and it's responsible for conducting a formal, fair, and totally impartial inquiry. And the way this committee is built is actually pretty brilliant. It's not just a random group of people. It's specifically structured for fairness. You have to have a senior-level woman as the chairperson. At least half of all the members have to be women. And this one is critical. You have to have an external member from an NGO or similar group to make sure the committee is truly independent and not just influenced by management.
The IC really has 2 jobs, and they're both equally important. On one hand, yes, it has redressal functions. That means investigating complaints when they come in. But just as important are its preventive functions, doing awareness programs, trainings, workshops, all to stop harassment from ever even happening. So it's about being both reactive and proactive.
Okay, so what actually happens when a complaint is officially filed? The Act is very clear about this. It lays out a strict, time-bound process that every single internal committee has to follow. Let's walk through those steps. The whole thing moves through 5 distinct stages. It all kicks off with a written complaint. Then there's an interesting optional step called conciliation, but it can only happen if the person who filed the complaint asks for it. If not, it moves right to a formal inquiry where both sides present their evidence. After that, the IC writes up its report with recommendations, and here's the kicker. The employer is legally bound to act on them.
And a critical feature of this whole process is that the clock is always ticking. The law sets these really strict deadlines to make sure justice isn't delayed. For instance, a complaint has to be filed within 3 months of the incident. The IC gets a maximum of 90 days to finish its inquiry. Then it has 10 days to get the report to the employer, who then has 60 days to take action. Things are meant to move.
Of course, having a law on paper is one thing, but making it truly effective in the real world? Well, that means you have to face some pretty serious challenges head-on.
And let's be real, ICs often face some major hurdles. Management might try to influence the outcome. Complainants and witnesses can be terrified of retaliation. And honestly, sometimes there's just a shocking lack of awareness among employees that the policy and the committee even exist in the first place.
So, how do you combat those challenges? It really comes down to adopting some clear best practices. That means truly empowering that external member, making sure they're independent. It means regular, trauma-informed training for the committee members themselves. It means adopting to a digital world with secure online procedures, and it means keeping meticulous, detailed records of everything.
And listen, this isn't just a wish list. The highest court in India is actively getting involved here. Recent Supreme Court directives are mandating regular audits of how these committees are actually working, and they're pushing for training to be more inclusive, specifically calling for sensitivity towards the LGBTQ+ community. So you can see, the law is a living thing, and it continues to get stronger.
So, look, understanding your rights and the systems that are in place to protect them, that is an absolutely crucial first step. But the real question this leaves us with is whether these powerful tools are being used effectively, not just on paper, but in the actual day-to-day culture of your own workplace.